Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wild Side with Wildlife SOS. And I'm Karthik Satyanarayan, co founder and CEO of Wildlife SOS. Joining us today is someone who's packed in a lifetime of conservation experiences. He's a large carnivore, field biologist, and a scientist with a unique background in chemistry. He's also a wildlife photographer and an author. He happens to also be the president of WCT, Wildlife Conservation Trust in India. I'm also very, very proud to call him a dear friend of mine and someone I really admire for his incredible fundraising skills and getting the stock market in Mumbai to back his work with conservation efforts. Dr. Anish Anderia, welcome to the show. Anish, how are you doing, my friend? It's great to have you on the show.
Yes, I think this is the second best thing that can happen. I would have loved to be in the same room as you. But well, I can see that gorgeous elephant behind you, and you can see my tiger. So I think the elephant and the tiger can also have a conversation as we discuss. And I'm very happy to participate. I mean, this is a show where you're going to interview me, but people already know your work, and I think it's a fabulous team that you have. And the kind of stuff that you do with on animal rights, especially even on rescue of wild animals, is quite commendable. And despite the COVID situation, I see your teams out there trying to rescue wild animals, and kudos to all of them. So wish all of them on my behalf as well.
How has this lockdown been for you? Has it impacted your work at WCT by any chance?
Our teams have collected huge amount of data over the last 10 and a half years. And when we put camera traps in large landscapes, and we normally camera trap in nearly 8,000 square kilometers of forest outside protected area every year. And because it's a large landscape, we obviously are looking for tiger photo captures. We also get leopards, and we also get a lot of other mesopredators. We also get jackals, wolves, hyenas, rattles, pangolins, and also a huge amount of human interference with people going with headloads of wood, people carrying guns in their hands. So we don't normally find time because we only have about 2.5 months every year during monsoon to analyze data, and that time is completely consumed by tiger work. So after the lockdown, the senior members of the team sat together, and we decided to go back in time and look at all the data that we have collected on other wildlife. And it's very, very interesting stuff that we are doing right now. The team is extremely, extremely busy. In fact, some of them are staying in our office in Nagpur. And so the work for them is going as usual. In fact, they have more time, and therefore a lot of analysis is being done.
Well, I'd like to first of all thank you so much for everything that you've been doing for the environment, for wildlife protection, and for Mother Nature, and your holistic approach to conservation. 11 years ago, your career took a new turn as you stepped away from the position that you had as director of Sanctuary Asia to join WCT, where you currently serve the role of president. What drove you to adopt this new role? Can you tell us about the vision and mission of WCT?
So WCT, people should know, started in 2002. It was registered in 2002, but it was a family trust. So it ran like that for about 7 years, where Mr. Hemendra Kothari's family continued to support the forest department through donations, largely vehicles, also helping some anti-poaching camps. In Sanctuary, it's a magazine, and it's probably been the Pied Piper for a generation, or maybe 3 generations of conservationists now in India. I have been reading Sanctuary magazine since I was in school. While magazines are important and they have a place in this game, I said that my passion is far too high to be satisfied by this vicarious feeling of encouraging people to do something for conservation. I would rather get my hands into conservation firsthand. So WCT, then I said, rather than just donating money, let us diversify and do some good quality work on the ground, because I realized that there was not much data. So I slowly started working in the ground, trying to collect a lot of good quality data and then keep it open source so that that data is available to other organizations. So that's what was a driving force, and therefore the hires that happened after that were keeping that in mind. So we built a team with people who feel claustrophobic in the house. So they are people who love to be in the jungles, and so they have spent days on end. Sometimes they don't come back home for 2.5 months, and so therefore I think WCT currently is a science-based advocacy, research, and policy organization. So we are now really like a think tank trying to build white papers based on hard science, empirical data, and then provide it to the world so that they can use that for fighting their own battles or for improving the conditions on the ground.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. You know, India's tiger population has doubled over the last 12 years, but I understand that's not all good news. What are the challenges that you face in tiger conservation in our country?
I don't go by this doubling idea. I basically feel that it's fundamentally wrong, because when you have a small population, it is very easy to double them. So if you had 2 tigers in Sariska, you can triple the population once that tiger gives birth. So if she gives birth to say 4 to 5 cubs, then you suddenly have, from 2 you'll have 7 tigers, and you would say I have kind of tripled the population. So while the credit must go to the forest department and the government for ensuring that the tiger population doesn't plummet, but this doubling thing is not something that I really advocate too much. Tiger populations were substandard say about 10-12 years ago, and therefore the only way it could go, like stock market, when it's at the bottom, it will go up. So the populations had to go up, and it has gone up only in 5 to 6 states. While tiger population has steadily gone up from 2006 onwards, the quality of forest of India has actually gone down since then. So the number of tigers have gone up, but the amount of habitat that was available for tigers has actually shrunk. And so it's a big cause of worry, because it's not just about tigers. When the forest shrinks, it starts impacting the hydrology of the landscape, which means the rivers start getting impacted. And many times those impacts are very, very difficult to reverse. For me, it's a metaphor. Tiger really is something that tells you how your ecosystem is going to behave. And we are the top predators on this planet. And so if tiger is getting affected, we are surely going to get affected. But you can understand, we have less than 3,000 tigers in India, but we have 1.3 billion people. So tiger is telling us, if we don't change our ways, we have catastrophe waiting for us. And these are not nature-made catastrophes. These are ones that we are creating.
You're absolutely right, Anish. I think what you're saying is the gory truth that exists out there. And I think, as you say correctly, tiger numbers should be viewed as an indication of forest health. So I think you're right. This is a warning by Mother Nature that we all have to heed. You know, I had a question. In 2018, you and WCT launched a mobile app called Roadkill with the aim of crowdsourcing the data of wild animals that are killed on the freeways in our country. Can you tell us the idea behind this and how it's working now?
India is building roads at such a high pace that it's almost impossible for the project proponents to do surveys of these roads. So rather than looking at all the roads, let us at least prioritize roads that are cutting the corridors currently. And so we started putting camera traps around those roads with permissions from the State Forest Department. In your camera traps, you will only get tigers and large mammals, but you will not get the frogs and the snakes and the lizards, the calotis. Hundreds and thousands of them get crushed every year across India. So there are a lot of good quality activists working in these spaces. So they do know that there is a problem because of the road, but they generally they will go by a news clip which says that a leopard was killed there. So what we did now, we have suggested the places where they have to follow the Wildlife Institute of India guidelines, to build those underpasses so that vehicles can go from the top and animals can go from below. And it's a great successful story, and it's largely because of science. So building on that, we realized that how much can we do? Because our teams could probably do this in 4 roads. We are looking at 200 kilometers of survey happening almost every alternate day. Okay, so it's not a small area. But India has so many parks, states, so many things happening there. So we said it's impossible for us to do it. And there are so many interested people, and interested not just in conservation. There are people who like driving. So if we provide a platform where the common man can start contributing, because these people have pent up energy, they don't know what to do, and it's almost impossible to do anything. So we said, let us come up with this and see what happens. So if we collect that for the next 2-3 years and we are better in marketing this, I think it will really help.
I think it's very, very important for us to install those safety measures within the road features that are getting developed in India, so that animals can go under these corridors or above the corridors and escape. I also wanted to ask you, you've co-authored 2 books on Indian wildlife titled India Naturally and the Periyar Inheritance. Can you tell us a little bit about these books? And more than anything else, I'm really curious how on earth you find the time to write books when I know you have a hectic schedule.
Yeah, I must admit that I want to write 10 books and I've written just 2. So time is not there. And so I'm actually, during the time of lockdown, I'm writing one page as a concept for the books that I want to write. And so, yes, I think these are all Sanctuary publications, and I have written several articles in several other publications also in Sanctuary that we have come up with. But India Naturally comes naturally to both Bittu and me. We thought it would be a great team effort, and so we decided to write about the parks that we know of. However, we can do 2 more editions of, in fact, volumes of the same India Naturally, because we have covered about 20-25 parks in the first, and we already have enough material in our heads to come up with volume 2 and 3. And Periyar, of course, is one of the most beautiful parks. So that's why, I've done that. But there are many such amazing landscapes in India, and I wish I can find some time to jot down some experiences. Writing books is just it helps me to relive those moments and probably immortalize them.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Anish. I'm going to now move us to our next segment, which is called Elephant in the Room. And I'm going to ask you a series of random questions that you have to answer as quickly as possible. Are you ready?
Yeah.
What is your spirit animal?
Killer whale.
What is the most unique creature you've ever photographed?
There are so many unique creatures, not one, but the snail-eating snake that I photographed in Arunachal.
If you could have a superpower, what would you choose?
I would use it to, take all the politicians and bureaucrats in a room and just clean up their heads and realign them so that they make sure that ecology is not shortchanged by economy.
Okay, describe one thing that makes you very, very happy.
That I'm alive, and that I can still breathe fresh air, and that I can be on foot and actually get an opportunity to see a tiger or an elephant or a rhino in the 21st century in India.
Absolutely. I think, we all need to be grateful. Gratitude is such an important thing, that we live in such a beautiful planet. And I wish everybody would wake up to that beauty and be more acknowledging as you are. Name your top 3 favorite animals.
Well, I'm not going to talk about tigers because I think everybody knows the involvement that I have. Let me top 3: king cobra, tiger shark, and snow leopard.
What is your advice to people who wish to pursue wildlife conservation?
That they need to build capacity in themselves. Conservation seems an easy field because a lot of it is logic. but it is, I would say, the most complex profession, because you need knowledge in multiple sectors. You have to be not only good at natural history, you also need to know the law, the policy. You need to be good in terms of your social quotient, which means you need to be able to communicate to everybody. So they need to have perseverance and a heart of steel, because they will lose more battles than they will win. For every battle that they lose, they should actually strengthen their resolve to fight the next one. There are so many things that one can do. It's not only about charismatic animals. There are things that you can do in your backyard. So conservation battles don't have to be fought in an iconic landscape. It can happen in your backyards, which means each one of us have an opportunity to become a conservationist.
You're so right, Anish. You take some of these words out of my mouth literally, and I feel like you're reading my mind sometimes. I think the battles that we fight on a day to day basis with conservation, I think you just have to agree that, okay, that's another battle that's lost. We fell flat on our face, we get up, dust ourselves off, and continue. And that's exactly what we had to do, when we had to bring an end to the trafficking of sloth bear cubs that was going on for decades and decades and decades. That's what we did as Wildlife SOS. We just went on working with the forest department, with the local communities, and we were constantly asked, why aren't you, treating them like offenders? We said, we've got to work with them. We've got to ensure that there's a sustainable solution so these people do not go back to exploiting wildlife again and again and again. And that's how we were able to bring an end to the whole process, and the practice of bear dancing, which was creating such a huge demand for sloth bear cubs. I also wanted to ask you, have you ever been chased by a wild animal on your expeditions?
Mostly it's the other way around. I only know me chasing all kinds of animals, microscopic, um, insects, lizards, snakes, mammals, marine life. Being a human, I think the forest where I go, that's the right place for that animal. It's a wrong place for me to be in. Every single time that I go to the forest, I know that I am the outsider and that I have to be ready for an eventuality. And so there have been many times where I have been charged by elephants, especially during my research work that I did in Nagarhole, Pandipur. So when I look at my notes, every fourth or fifth day, I have a paragraph on how I found myself in between a herd of elephants and how magnanimous they were. Uh, in the hindsight, I say at that point, obviously, I was thinking like an animal and trying to assess from their body language as to what they want me to do. And as you can see, I was successful in doing what they wanted me to do. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here talking to you. One very interesting incident was when I was in Nagarhole on a transect. And I was on a trail. There were again alarm calls, but then they went silent. At that on that day, I hardly saw anything on the transect path through the jungle. I could see some langurs and also I was noting that down. And then I saw a spotted deer male running towards me on the transect, and it was about 100 meters away. So obviously, I knew that the deer is going to eventually see me and turn, and the trajectory will move away. But it didn't. It just kept coming, and so I kept looking at the deer. And then finally, I had to move a bit. With that antlers, you could really get killed if a stag hits you. But what happened next is very interesting. I was looking at the deer, but actually there was a leopard on the transect that was trying to ambush this deer, who probably figured out that there was a leopard there, and it ran, and then the leopard started coming towards me. So I said, I mean, this is just too much to digest. You have a deer running at you, then you suddenly have a leopard that's coming towards you. Then the leopard saw and turned its trajectory at about, I think, 20 meters or something. Behind the leopard, there were wild dogs. So, and the wild dogs also kept running, and then they saw me. So they actually stood up. Two of them stood up on their hind legs to look at me because there was a lot of grass. And so all that within a short period. So I'm taking more time to narrate it. It happened faster than that. So those kind of things happen all the time. And each one of those incidences have made me a better naturalist.
You know, you're absolutely right. And when you say all this, it just takes me back in time to the time I was doing a lot of research in Nagarhole, in Kana, in Kaziranga. And it reminds me, I've been chased by rhinos, by elephants, and my closest encounter was a sloth bear as well as a tiger. But not even once has an animal, a wild animal, made contact with me. Bears are misunderstood creatures, and you'd be very happy to know that Wildlife SOS has done some research on bear attack behavior, because you know there are advisories, there are videos, there are books on North American bears, but we don't have those kind of advisories in India for sloth bears, and people are terrified of sloth bears because they are very protective of their cubs and their areas. So our research has indicated that you can very easily, if you understand bear attack behavior, you can very easily avoid it. So we've actually just developed a film, educational documentary film on living with sloth bears with National Geographic, and it shows people, and this is primarily for communities who live in landscapes where they share a space with sloth bears. So it can easily educate them on how to survive and coexist in peace and harmony with sloth bears in your surroundings. But Anish, thank you so much for sharing all of that. That was just amazing. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Do you have a message for the viewers?
Well, my message is that we have lost a lot of time. We have entered a phase where we don't have luxury of time. We are on a so-called a snowball, and it's almost going to start rolling. Once it starts rolling, it will be impossible because we'll be on it to stop it. So don't take the warnings that scientists are giving you for granted. These are real things. If not for themselves, they need to do something for the unborn generations of wild animals and humans. There is role for everybody, and there is no tomorrow.
Well said, Anish. You're absolutely right, and I hope our viewers will take your message seriously and move on in the direction to ensure that nature protection and wildlife conservation can be respected. It was such a delight to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope to see you soon. Stay safe and stay home.
Thank you for having me. Thank you to the entire team.